Did I say good and mad? It's the title of a book, and we've got one of the authors here. Hi, welcome to the 13th State. I'm Paul Zangari, and this time around we're talking with Lisa Tenner. She's from Saunderstown, and well, the title of the book that she co-wrote is Good and Mad. That's the main title. We'll get into all the details, but first of all, we'll say hi. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Paul.
Good to have you here. It's funny, this is Rhode Island, and I should point out in the interest of full disclosure, your mother-in-law is Mimi Samus, who helps us out here at the station with the art auction. We just found this out after we booked the show, and that my cousins are neighbors of yours. So it's a small world. But anyway, full disclosure. Tell me a little bit about Good and Mad, because, you know, in looking at the book, you know, there are three authors listed. The first one listed is Jane Middleton Mose and you and Pico Todd. And it turns out, though, the idea originated with you.
It did, and with the idea of anger-aerobics. Ways that people could access their anger and experience their anger without going into unhealthy patterns. Whether people push it down or lash out at others, there are other ways to deal with anger, to acknowledge it, but then to figure out what one's needs are and communicate those in a healthy way.
And anger's all around us.
Absolutely, it sure is. You don't have to look very far. Supermarket, the cars. Yeah.
But what was it that was sort of the impetus that pushed you over the edge to get going on this?
Well, I was lying in bed one night feeling kind of angry myself and not sure why, and thought, gee, what if I just thought of this as energy instead of anger, but just powerful energy? And I did that for a few minutes, and I started to feel great. I felt all this powerful energy rushing through my body, but then I couldn't. It kept me up, and I couldn't sleep. So I thought, well, why not write a book?
Okay.
And I started coming up with these exercises that would help people to think of their anger a little differently, and then be able to use that information behind the anger to lead a more happy life, become more aware, and express themselves better. So I actually approached a friend, Pico Todd, who'd recently written, at that time recently, that was 8 years ago, she'd written a study skills guide and used cartoons. She is a cartoonist as well as an author. And I thought, we thought this might be a great way to help people access the information, but have it be fun and have it be a little bit light with practical information as well. We soon realized we really wanted an anger expert involved, and Jane Middleton Mose had written 8 books at that time on anger and related subjects. So we approached Jane, and much to her surprise, she said yes. She was really excited about the project.
You thought she was going to be mad, right?
Well, I thought she might ignore us, but she really got it, that humor can really help people to shift that angry emotion and find out what's behind it.
Yeah, my understanding was, looking at the biographical information about her, is that she's done a lot, I guess, on the clinical level. And,
that's right.
And so this must have been a completely different means of attacking the idea of anger for her.
It is, although there is that information too, just the psychological background that we include in the book, but in a way that's really easy to access.
In other words, you don't have to be a shrink to read this book,
that's right.
Which is what I found when I sat down with it.
In fact, we wrote it for adults, but I recently noticed a friend's 7-year-old reading the book, and she said, oh, he loves it. He loves the cartoons, and he's really found the book helpful because he has a bad temper. So that was kind of neat to find out that a 7-year-old could find the book useful too.
It's interesting, the personality trait coming out at the age of 7.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about anger. First of all, the fact that it is universal. I mean, it just seems in this day and age that everybody, even though we try to be as civil as we can and usually get away with being civil, it doesn't seem to take a whole lot to scratch below that surface and get somebody to snarl.
I think that's true, and I think part of that is that that we're stressed out, and so the more stressed we are, if we're not getting sleep or we're not eating properly or we're just finding a lot of stresses in our life, the more likely we are to use our anger in an inappropriate way and express it inappropriately.
What is it that's causing the stress?
Oh, I think people's lifestyles, working super hard and not taking time to relax. Some of the exercises that we offer people are exercises that just help people take that second to relax before they react, and that can be very helpful.
I know, you know, we were talking, you're mentioning the exercises, and I just realized, and I hope you have enough microphone cord to be able to show one or two of them.
Sure, and if not, I have some I can show sitting down too.
Oh, good, all right, yeah, because I would like for you to be able to demonstrate some of what you're talking about. But as far as the emotion of anger, getting back to what you were saying right at the beginning, you were, you felt anger and you felt that energy, and the energy doesn't have to be a bad thing, does it?
No, it doesn't. In fact, Harriet Lerner, who wrote The Dance of Anger, said anger is a signal and one worth listening to. It's a response, it's a physiological response to a perceived threat. So we think, gee, this is going to hurt me, or this person's trying to hurt me, or something like that. Or sometimes it's just that we're tired. Well, that's a threat to our system physiologically, too.
Sounds like it's tied in with fear.
It can be, yes, very much. So there is this threat, and we feel this emotion response to it, and how we react is really, we often call that anger, but it's a little bit separate from the emotion of anger. And so when we throw things or yell at people or say things that are hurtful, that's an unhealthy anger response. And we would call that unhealthy anger in the book. But when we express ourselves and say, gee, when you come home late and don't call me to let me know, I feel angry, that's a perfectly healthy expression of anger.
And that would seem to me to indicate levels of anger, too. In other words, I'm not happy that you didn't call me, as opposed to, boy, I want to put your lights out.
Well, and sometimes that kind of brings up the difference between anger and rage. And just plain anger, we're in control of it. But rage, we're not in control at all. It's in control of us.
Okay. You know, in some of the examples that I was looking at in the book, I think you've made it clear that a lot of times the anger that a lot of people feel goes way, way back. You could be having a bad day, but your reaction to it can be much worse than one bad day would warrant.
Absolutely. We call that triggers, when somebody is reacting not just to what's going on in the present moment, but it reminds them of something in the past. And often it can be something like someone raises their voice and that triggers us. Or for me, if somebody sprays like Raid or sprays an insect repellent, I immediately, because I think of that stuff as poisonous, I have this ridiculous reaction because it's reminding me of something that has nothing to do with what's going on in the present, but there is that link that triggers me.
Now that would seem to suggest that if a lot of what triggers rage in people or anger is based upon the past, that you're a parent of a young child, so am I. A lot of what we do with our kids as we're bringing them up will have a lot to do with how they react when they get older.
That's absolutely true. It's a huge responsibility, and I think often we were taught either not to express anger at all, or we saw our parents expressing it in unhealthy ways that we then repeat. But one of the things that we can do with children is to acknowledge that maybe they're feeling angry or that they want something very desperately. So they're starting to have a temper tantrum. We can say, I can see you really want that video. And then to say, but we can't do that right now. And then to offer another solution. Maybe we can watch it after we eat dinner. Or, gee, maybe we can watch it tomorrow. Or, well, do you think maybe we can come up with a solution? What do you think, honey? And so you can actually negotiate within the context of limits that you want to set.
Now, when you say negotiate, I mean either or, like either you can have dinner or watch a Barney video, but not both.
Well, I don't know if you'd want to do that, but maybe something like, would you like to watch it after dinner, or would you like to watch it tomorrow, rather than watching it now? So you set your limit that we're not watching it now, but offer a couple choices, or see if the child can come up with a time that they'd like to watch it that is appropriate.
Okay, so that's one of the things that you have to kind of get going with your children, in other words. But are there others? Are there other things that you should keep in mind when maybe something that the little person does might get you a little mad yourself?
Absolutely. We often get triggered, and I think a child's whining or crying can be a universal trigger. So immediately, often we're reminded of when we felt powerless as children. And so the child is reacting and screaming, and we're feeling powerless inside when, in fact, we really have all the power, but we're not using it. So it's important to remember, oh, okay, that's what I do when he cries, but I'm not going to go there now. I'm in control. Maybe you have some words that you say to yourself. Maybe you tense your hands and relax them just to kind of release some of that energy.
An anger aerobic right there.
Yeah, an anger aerobic. And then you can say what you're angry about. Gee, when you scream like that, that's not appropriate. We need to resolve this in another way. But to acknowledge their feeling again, I think that's really important to say. I can tell you're angry. Let them have the feeling. And maybe even say you can do what they call wish fulfillment. So I wish I could give this to you right now, but we're going to eat dinner, so I can't give you the apple now. We can have it after dinner.
Sometimes I'm thinking, too, it also depends on where the child is in, let's say, language development.
Absolutely.
You might want to maybe play with the child when they're getting whiny or something, just divert their attention.
Yes, yeah, sometimes distraction can be helpful, but not to the point of if you're always distracting, then they learn not to have that emotion, that emotion's not okay. And you really do want them to learn that their emotions are okay, and they can use their problem-solving skills to deal with their anger. They can use their words rather than hitting.
That's interesting, because so much of what you've been saying has to do with anger and controlling it and learned response.
Yeah, and it takes time. It definitely does.
What about on the adult level? I mean, you can find yourself in a situation at work where, let's say, the person in the next cubicle is talking loudly on the phone all the time and making it hard for you to get things done. How do you react to a situation like that without moving it up a notch and turning it into a war of words between you and your coworker?
Well, the first thing might be to acknowledge something positive about it. Gee, I know how excited you get when you're on the phone, and it's great that you have so much excitement about the product that we sell or whatever it is. But I find it difficult to concentrate. Is it, are you able to take it down a notch for me? That would be a real help. Or maybe you can find a way that that person's going to make their phone calls largely at a certain time of day, and you're going to make your phone calls or whatever work you need it to be more quiet another time of day. Find ways to accommodate each other. Maybe say, I'll be out the rest of the afternoon. Maybe that's a time you can make the loud calls.
But I would imagine there are also some very counterproductive ways that people try to deal with a situation like that, and they're all too common.
Sure, gossiping might be one, talking behind the person's back, or retaliating might be another. And one of the things we do in Good and Mad is to describe a whole bunch of different anger styles, passive Polly and bullying Boris, and to talk about different ways to deal with those styles, because every style will have a different way that's helpful to deal with them.
Let's go into that. That's a major feature of the book, and I think some of the examples would be pretty helpful just to put on the table right now and explain how they work.
Sure. Well, one is somebody like a bullying Boris, and bullies really require a certain amount of tacit approval from the group often, and they're looking to divide and conquer, so that if I'm going to bully you, I'll do it in a way where maybe other people will feel scared, and so they'll worry that if they speak up, I'll bully them too. But I'm really dependent on the fact that they're not going to do something. So if all of you start to talk and say, look, let's do something about the way Lisa's been bullying us, then suddenly I'm in a much less powerful position. Even if I am the boss, that you do have power as a group.
But that sounds as if when a person is doing that sort of thing and trying to gain power in the group, that they've got another problem that's below the surface, as in they're feeling powerless and they're trying to compensate.
That's absolutely it. And actually our co-author Jane, as well as writing Good and Mad, has written a book called Bullies that deals with, they actually interviewed a lot of bullies, and these were bullies who had sort of changed their ways, but people who said that they did feel extremely, extremely vulnerable, and that is why they were bullying, and they were bullied as children. So that's where they learned that behavior.
It's that learned behavior once again, and patterns that you pick up when you're young and you take with you through life.
Yeah.
Yep.
And another thing we talk about with bullies is look the bully directly in the eye, stand confidently, because the more confident you are, the more they'll look for an easier target.
I was thinking when the bully does bully in public, are they looking for the bystanders to kind of come to their, I don't know, look up to them, I suppose?
Often, yeah, I think it gives them a sense of power and not necessarily esteem, but kind of in a roundabout way they feel that it gives them an importance in the group.
But now if someone is coming to bully me, my reaction to it, I mean, it can make me mad. And how do I react to that to not escalate the situation and make it worse without being walked all over by the bully?
Right. Right. Well, I think that's a good question, and one might be to think about what are my needs in this situation, and then to express them very clearly, and also what is the behavior that bothers me. So instead of saying you're such a bully, or you're such a jerk, to say very specifically, when you took credit for the work I did, and then called me,
put me down,
or whatever, then I felt angry, and that's not acceptable behavior. So I need for you to, first of all, credit me for my work and not speak badly of me in front of other people. If you have something to say about my work, then you need to say it to me directly.
I can't help thinking if someone is trying to push someone around, that the reaction of the pushee is, is either
Yes,
going,
right,
hey,
or
yeah,
the other one.
And somewhere in between is maybe the most helpful or the healthiest?
Yes, I think, when we go like this, we might not be thinking as clearly, and we might not feel as grounded. We're kind of all up here, but if we can really get grounded and say, okay, deep breath, now, what's going on here? And what do I really need, and what do I want out of the situation? And often I think, if it becomes a fight, it's sort of a lose-lose, or maybe somebody wins, somebody loses. But when we really get down to being honest with each other, even with a bully, it can be very productive. And when we get to intimate relationships, that's where it's really important to be honest, because if we're not honestly communicating, then there's just not that intimacy and trust that makes a relationship grow and flourish.
I want to talk about that in a second, but you also mentioned passive Paula, was it? Or Polly? I'm getting some of the characters mixed up.
Well,
I'm
not even sure if it's passive Polly in the book or passive somebody else, but
yeah,
passive aggressive personality. Often people who were taught not to express their anger outright do it in a passive aggressive way, so that I may act like everything's fine, and behind your back I might be putting you down or gossiping, or I think we have a cartoon in the book where the husband the husband doesn't want to cook dinner, and the wife says, basically talks him into it, so he makes the hot dogs dinner that she hates. And he feels good momentarily, like, oh, I really outdid her, but is that really good for the relationship? Or he's going to get it himself, and in the cartoon, she's throwing out the remote control, and he wants to watch the football game later. So, passive aggressives, you'll always get it back.
Well, you're taking it into the next area that I wanted to get into, which was the closer relationships than the one at work, and we had talked a little bit earlier, and we did want to show an example of one of Pico Todd's cartoons, and this one is a single plate, so this one's going to work, and I just have to get it in front of the proper camera here. But this is a situation at home, and let's see, I can't really read it from this angle, but basically, she's really mad, and he realizes she had a bad car day. And I think the point that you make with this cartoon is that there's something that set her off, and he was smart enough in his reaction to realize it wasn't anything he said.
Right. So often we take it personally, and it's not.
But that is an example of the, as I fold it over, the type of situation that can turn into something much bigger than it ought to be if someone reacts in the wrong way.
Yeah, and that's where humor comes in too. If we can, in our intimate relationships, realize when that kind of thing is going on and make fun of the situation, or help the person to realize without judging, without blaming what's going on, it can be very effective.
But how do you do that? That sounds like something that you've really got to work at.
You do. It doesn't come right away. But one thing is to think about different ways you can use humor. And one is just silliness. One time my husband and I were driving back from Vermont, and usually I'm the more annoying of the two of us, but when we're driving in the car, he's a backseat driver and definitely wins the more annoying title.
Are you going to keep him occupied while the show's on the air at this part?
Actually,
okay.
He's given me permission to tell this story.
So he won't get mad.
No.
Okay.
That's right. I wouldn't tell his story if he hadn't. But my hands are on the wheel. He doesn't like the position that they're in. Then how about passing this guy, and why don't you put it in cruise control? And he's always got wonderful pointers for me. So finally I'm at the point where I'm about to yell at profanity, and I think, first of all, my 3-year-old's in the back seat, and also I'm supposed to be an anger expert. I'm not supposed to say these things.
Okay.
So the past Lisa would have yelled, and I won't say it here, but I definitely would have given a few choice words. But instead, I just started to bark. And it was such a ridiculous thing, but he started to laugh. We both laughed. And laughter, of course, releases a lot of tension. And it helped him, without my saying anything, he realized what he was doing. And he was able to just let go of it, and the rest of the ride, which is another 3 hours, he never did it again.
So you defused the situation.
It worked.
You know, that works inside the car, but I was just thinking sometimes, you know, with other drivers, once someone thinks that you cut them off or whatever perceived awful behavior on your part by another driver, I don't know of any ways that you can defuse another driver.
Yeah, I think that's a harder one, and if you can get out of his way is probably the best thing you can do, because if that person's starting to drive unsafely and tailgate you, or you know they're just screaming and you can see that they're not driving safely.
You go to McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts or something and let them keep going.
Get out of the way is probably the best thing. But if you're in the opposite situation and someone does cut you off and you're feeling angry, there are a lot of things you can do. And you know, one is just to realize that my anger at the person who cut me off is not going to affect him in any way unless I crash into him, but it's going to affect me pretty profoundly. You know, it's going to affect me physiologically, all these hormones pumping through my body. I'm going to be stressed. Long term, that can affect my heart and my health.
Heaven forbid if you act on it. I mean, there are people who've been jailed for things that they've done to other drivers.
Right, that's the other thing. And I could get into an accident. It is a dangerous thing. And it also, you know, I might just take that bad mood home with me or to the party or whatever. So, you know, it's worth letting go of, but then how do I do that? One thing is to reframe it. So to say, one thing is that poor slob, he's probably 15 minutes late already, let him go. Another is my husband's grandfather always says, oh, gotta let this guy go. He's probably rushing to the hospital. And of course, he's probably not. But, you know, it is possible. We always think we know the truth, and we, of course, always take it personally, but he could be rushing to the hospital. So why not give him the benefit of the doubt?
You reminded me of something. I've never mentioned this on the air before. I actually got hit by a guy who ran a stop sign because he was late for traffic court. That's what his insurance company told me.
That's really funny. Wow.
But,
right. I remember.
I don't consider that an excuse, though. But it was so long ago. I have to tell you, though, I was probably about 19 at the time, and I didn't get mad.
Wow.
But it wasn't my car that I was driving either.
That probably helped.
Yeah, it could be. But the road rage is such an example. I think you paint a picture in your mind of the other driver as being a much worse person than they are. They probably have a family, and you know, if you were to run into them, say, at church, it would be a completely different situation. They just happen to do something dumb behind the wheel.
Right. Well, and also there's this other thing about somebody gets in front of me, now he's winning or something. And if I could just reframe that, and you know, not the person in front wins, but the person who's the most relaxed wins, that can go a long way to, you know, sort of calming down about it. I think the other thing is really preparing ahead of time. If you know you get angry in the car, then to say, okay, I'm going to give myself extra time, so being late isn't an issue. Now, I don't do that myself. I'm always rushing. But
that's part of what we were talking about earlier, about society today. We're always in a rush.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a tough one to deal with.
It is tough. The other thing is you can play relaxing music in the car, and you can tell yourself ahead of time, okay, if somebody cuts me off, I'm going to reframe it. I'm going to find some way to explain it.
I'm not going to let them get to me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You know, I was just noticing the time cue, and we're so close to the end of the show, and the only anger aerobic we've gotten so far has been tense and released. Better show us a few more while we've got the time.
Well, here's one, and if I had a pen, I'd show you. You have a pen?
Here's a pen.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do, and you're welcome to join me in this, is write something that I feel angry about on the bottom of my shoe. That was quick, wasn't it? I did actually write something.
Okay.
And then just, and I do have enough mic. Stop.
Okay.
And, you know, it may seem silly, but often I think somebody who's used to lashing out needs some kind of physical release. And if you write a person you're mad at or something that really gets you a lot, and do that like all week, you will definitely find yourself releasing it.
Stomping it right out.
So, and the anger aerobics, they're really designed for different learning styles, different personalities. So you just have to find one or two things in the book that really work for you, and then keep using them. And I think that's how Good and Mad can be helpful.
Let me ask you something, because this, being an author is new for you, but you've been doing a certain amount of touring and book signings and that. And I want to ask you how you like it, and also let's get your website up on the screen here too, and let people know where they can see if you're going to be in their area. The website is Good and Mad, 13thState.com,
Yeah.
which kind of fits considering that's the name of the book. I should say the front of the name of the book. We never gave the entire name. But what's
yeah.
it been like being an author? We'll get the name in a second.
Okay. It's been really fun. As a child, I always knew I'd be a writer. And I did a lot of writing in other ways, but when I worked for a nonprofit organization, I wrote a lot there. But it was really wonderful. And it's really great to talk about anger because I think so often people, my husband says it's like writing a book on sex. You know, it's kind of embarrassing to tell
everywhere.
people. But it's everywhere. And if we can get people to change their behaviors, and if we can change our behaviors ourselves, then we're really working towards a peaceful planet and happier lives.
And it sounds like opening up is a very, very big part of that. From what you were saying in the book about expressing how something that someone says or does gets you a little mad at first, but before you get way, way up there.
Definitely expressing our needs and then listening to other people, really listening.
Okay, let me get the full name of the book here. The name of the book is Good and Mad: Transform Anger Using Mind, Body, Soul, and Humor. Got it right that time. Okay, and your co-authors are Jane Middleton Moz and also Pico Todd. Okay, and in the 1 minute that's left, it's an opportunity if you want to show us one or two more anger aerobics.
Sure. This one's not in the book, but this is a really easy one to demonstrate, and it's a yoga pose called the lion, where you just kind of scrunch up, tense up, and and you wouldn't want to do it in front of anyone, but if you're home alone and angry, yeah, that's true. In general, it's the kind of thing you probably want to do at home, but it's nice. And another one I like to do, which also is a yoga exercise, is we call it spiritual warrior, but it's kind of a very grounding pose, and you can kind of tell yourself some words. Oh, my right hand is reaching into the past to understand, and my left hand reaching out into the world to be an instrument of peace.
Lisa Tenner, thanks very much, and thanks for watching. See you next time on the 13th State. Bye now. Thank you. That worked.